Okay, you should hopefully do it. If not, then we won't have a screencast. So last week we had an introduction, and if you worked through the YouTube videos, you learned all about means, modes, calculating a 95% confidence interval, and like a little bit of data manipulation. So learning how to filter all out the missings of a data set, and trying to select one specific airline or a specific airport from that flight's data set. And today is all going to be about visualization. It's all about making pretty graphs and trying to make some graphs to understand your data, which is also part of what you'll be doing if you work with researchers or if you're trying to make reports. Yeah. So the goals of today is that we do a little bit more of data manipulation, as we did last time. We'll learn a little bit about data visualization, making histograms, making box plots. So you should have sort of known what a histogram is from your basic stats course. And so we'll learn how to do that in R. And then we'll talk, again, these should ring a bell. So these are basic t-tests. And you should also know that there's a non-parametric alternative. You might have heard of a Man-Whitney U-test. So we'll run to those. So those are basic stats you should have had in your undergrad. And we'll run through how you do those in R. Okay, so after today, you should be able to complete the following bits. I'll see if I can just put this. No. Yeah, we'll have that on top. So after today, you should be able to complete the following sections of your assignments. You should be able to do the descriptive statistics and data ranking, so mean, medians, modes, all the things you did last time as well. You should be able to manipulate data, like filter out missing variables, select subsets of cases like only men or only women. So those are the type of things you should be able to do. You should be able to make a histogram, and you should be able to make a violin plot. And what a violin plot is, you're going to find out. And then you're going to find out also how to do like independent samples t-tests and non-parametric alternatives, as well as bootstrapping. That's also part of that. So again, we return to the, so if you work with the exercise, you by now are familiar with this massive data set with over 300,000 flights, yeah? So big data. And a large part of what I'll talk to you about today is, again, we're going to use this flights data set to do some type of thing. So this is how you load the data, so library NYC flights. And so some people run into problems with their assignments because they forgot to load the library within a chunk, and then it won't run because it needs to be available. And then you have to name like a data frame, so it sort of knows and it's stored somewhere, and you can use it later. Everybody gets this, yeah? So this should also, even if you didn't watch the YouTube video, this is part of what I still covered last week in class. So, if you watched the YouTube video and you've done the assignment, you by now are also familiar with the amazing DeepFire package. So DeepFire, so last week you learned how to pick observations. So you picked all the flights from JFK Airport, or you picked all the flights from Delta Airlines, all the flights from United Airlines. So you learned how to use the filter command in DeepFire. And there's other commands which I told you about last week, and I'm just going to run through some of them. And you should know about them, and you can read about them, and you can apply them. And I'll give you some examples as to how to apply them. So you can reorder rows by the arrange command, and why you want to do that. You can read further about that. But if you want to restructure rows, you can use reorder. You can pick variables by their names by using the select command. So if you want, often you have dozens and dozens of variables, and you only need a subset. So you want 5 of those. Then you can use select to make a smaller data frame, which you can then work with. You can create new variables, and this is one of the power horses we'll learn about today via mutate. So mutate will be like your SPSS transform, where you transform variables. So often you want to add a constant, so you want to add 10 points, or you want to do something like that, or you want to create an average of some sort of several variables, and you would have done that in SPSS with transform, and the R analog of this is mutate. And often also, what you can do straight away is get a summary statistic. So you want to find out for all the United Airline flights, or for all the Delta Airline flights, you want to find out their mean, median, modes. And you can use summarize to get some of the summary statistics straight away. So rather than printing as output, you can make a new data frame with just the summary statistics, which you can then use in further calculations or further plots. So that's the summarize function. So load dplyr, again, like last time, it will give you lots of warnings, yeah? And I'll now run you through some of the things. I'll run through a range because I don't very often use that. We can read about it more there. But select, again, the goal is sometimes you have over 100 or even 1,000 variables. If you run a Qualtrics survey, it will print lots of these variables. And the goal is to reduce some of them to get a working data set. And you can use select to make a reduced data frame. And this is how you would go about doing this. So you would have, here I made a new flights red. And I use select. This is the flights data frame, which would generate easy. And I said year, month, day. So this will just be a data frame with year, month, day in it. Yeah. So this, what you have to bear in mind. So if I do the next step, this will overwrite flights red, yeah, because I've named it the same way. So I've chosen to do that. But in some of your cases, you want to make new data frames, and sometimes you want to overwrite them. Yeah. So. But be aware if you've overridden it, it's gone. Yeah, it's not stored anywhere. So an alternative way, which you should also know from last time, is that you can use the double point to say anything between this and this, make this. So this would do the same thing, but you don't have to write year, month, day. But if your columns are organized year, month, day, it will take anything from year to day in between. Yeah, everybody understands this? So this is the same as you saw last time with making sequences. So if you want to make a sequence 1 to 5, you don't have to type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can use 1 and then double point. What do you say? What column is it? I don't know. I'm gonna continue calling you double point because that's the Dutch term for it. So so this is all, and you can also use the minus command if you want to exclude certain things. So this would so next step would be all columns excluding those from year to day. So that's an easy way if you just want to get rid of some variables. Use the minus commands. Everybody understands this? Yeah. So it's just you have a data frame, you apply a function to it, and then it will create a reduced data frame. So try it yourself now. You can team up with a partner last time. Load the flights data set. Make a new data frame with all variables starting from departure time to arrival delay inclusive. What, you can't load it? Yeah, but you should download it. So right click. If you go back to you should be able to save target as. You should be able to save it as a fing. It says it's an RNG file, which will unlock. So work in teams and try to work your way through the example I just found. And if you're done, go and help the other groups which are. So you need to have the NYC flights package installed.
I've just managed to download it last week and then I've had to download it again. So
Okay.
No, I don't want it downloaded.
So this is how
so
you install
we're just installing NYC flights 30.
No,
and then you should download it from the platforms. So it will all of these. And you should be able to download the empty file from Blackboard and then load it there. So you save target as well.
Never happens.
this is
One class?
yeah.
Okay. So what? Well, there's steps. So you should be able to load the flights data set and then make a reduced, make a new data frame with the variables going from departure time to arrival time. Yes.
Yeah.
So the things within the gray bit, in case that wasn't obvious, the things within the gray bit are chunks. The other things are marked down text. So anything you type out in the white thing will not be evaluated as code.
So if you do insert R, right, so if it looks like...
Sorry. Well, you want to,
So is that right? And then it'll come up like that.
yes. So it's done everything between departure time and arrival delay.
Right, okay.
Well done.
No, it's not just you.
Yeah, so that's the, so you have it here as well.
Yeah.
So you have 6 variables now. You can actually go back and check the other one, which has 9 variables.
Right.
You can see departure time to arrival delay, and it should be, you can count, it should be 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah. Well, how many
And so then if you wanted to save it, you can knit it as before, and you can save it now. So if you just click this, it will run the chunk, and if you click knit, it will make an HTML file, which you will store in your working directory.
Yeah.
Okay. So perhaps because you've got the solution, you can then walk around and help others.
Right. So right. That's what we did. So like. So and I just drop it down.
What is the confusing part? So, got the first part. Otherwise,
I'm looking at these now.
to her.
I'm doing it, but it's in
Yeah.
I don't know what
I think you have to one flight first. If you've got flights there, you can type flights area. So if you type flights,
Yes.
and then use the little variable arrows thing, and then NY.
It's alright, I didn't do the thing of the slide.
Yeah, NY is 13.
Right.
And then the one that takes it from it.
How are they seeing it?
I'm going to copy what I learned yesterday for
So
that
that's
was
assigning all this to that. So you're selecting flights, which is like this broad one that you've made, and then the departure time to arrival delay. So you're taking from that just 6 there. And that's all that's doing. And my hashtag is can you do planes, flights,
Found the right version.
it'd still be flights, but then
yeah,
flights
like
have to
I've
decide.
seen
You have to filter it.
and what everything to do is.
Yeah, otherwise it's not stuff
So we've got flights down
Yeah.
ticked on the right, but it's just not done.
Yes, it will. You do this now. Run now. It won't do this because you have to install all the bits when you do this first. Fine. That's fine. This. Multiple things. At the end, we'll type things. Now you do this. flights database. And then now if you do knit, it will make an HTML. Yeah. If you're done, I really like it. It'd be great if you help other people.
I was just writing down.
Oh yeah. Well, once you're done, like I think it's more helpful if one of you tells them rather than me or something.
I just don't know nothing, absolutely nothing. Right. So I've managed to apply to the content same thing.
So you. So more games like that. So you name whatever you guys want to do. So when you use the arrow, yeah. So when you use like the arrow, that bit.
No, right. But I think what you can talk on is
If you get stressed about it, I just can't. Should that work? I just sat for a week doing tutorials. I couldn't do like that won't work.
So C will make it into a vector.
Right. So yeah.
The DeepFire
So that's all of like right. This one. Yeah, that's like all of them. So what you're trying to do with the select is you're trying to just if you look online. Yeah. What you're trying to do is just take them six. So right, that's what you think. So what you're trying to do is take whatever you want to call that.
get the tickets,
And then
so it has to
select.
with builds of chunks.
Right.
So it doesn't know
Brackets, and then it would fly.
So
And
then
then
so
Yes.
So what I want in here.
Yeah, because like the survival there, and it'd be the cause that you want to do that.
perhaps you can
Yeah. So you think and then if you just
so knit, okay.
You
So
name
knit.
it.
So if you do you've done last time.
I filtered it. I just mean like you can name it whatever you want.
And then you make
Just name it flight
make
to
an HTML.
got
And if we're going to run some things, so just run this chunk scale.
because I had like what you guys like
Right, I'll take a photo of this.
Yeah, basically.
I had a copy. Should be NYC and make sure it's and then I DeepFire.
got the
And
experience.
then it's NYC. I've got to do something about
When
it.
you type,
Go back on the packages, but then
And then you should do and then you should do whatever you want all there.
The problem is that you've sealed it where it doesn't allow us to install things.
You can put yours as well as like a space.
And so you
Yeah, so
have
then it's the open.
just to switch to
So there's like the open thing. And then you go dash and then select
whatever you want to do. I want it to look like
try occasionally do a very specific setup.
that's not in the group.
How to manage your desktop. You won't be able to write this in directories. You won't run. So this is a PC which you've sort of sealed off. Directories, you won't be able to use
have you done it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so tell them to install that and have a look. Yeah, exactly. Because you don't have
Thank you.
It's alright, don't worry.
Did yours work when you clicked on it?
Yeah.
I've just spent all day with slides.
This thing is so is that
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of console. Yeah, like what's going on with the load.
It's not
Should, yeah, so you would have already doing something, so you have
Yeah, I think
Right.
so it's all just like
Yeah,
white
in my
lights
work.
and all that stuff.
and this stuff will be this is key.
I think
So when you take it out,
Yeah. So these one you have to do that. So
That's just so
hold
it's
click on one of them, it'll show you like
you have to hold the firewall. That's the error in select. So it's very quicky. So
Ah,
if you
right.
and white flights, it's like NYC flights. Now it's
right, so this is the one here. So it's lights.
you made that.
all loaded.
We did 10 minutes. Haven't done that.
That was
It's like different again. So it's our it's different time than on flights. So it's made it's made by
Am I doing it wrong?
Is it done at
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
So it means everything from between everything going from the part time to around the delay.
And then
Yeah.
what is that? So that's all.
Okay, that makes sense because you can see it actually happening.
Yeah.
Students, but on these data campus,
Yeah,
you can show you what's actually
Exactly.
happening behind.
It's just like a
Yeah, so that's why I was like,
Two doesn't
all
make
this.
sense.
Look at how it's done and it doesn't make sense.
I don't use it. Like, and I couldn't figure out this for this thing.
Yes, that means
I was like, oh,
look
okay, I
at this. So this tells you NYC flights look for this.
Okay.
This one single bubble dot means from this. Yeah. So this is the way in which you can load data directly into the package.
You put it yourself.
So you made it.
this is just my
That's all.
that's all.
See.
So you can do memory stick in that.
That's not level all that right now.
Yeah, anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it takes a long time. Next time, load a PC from back. There are some of you where I can't really help because it's you don't have seem to have write permissions on very specific locations. It's because your setup is sort of sealed off, so we can't install packages and those type of things. So in those cases, you'll either have to use a desktop or you'll have to talk to IT or somebody to find out whether you have access to write to those directories. So those things I can't fix because they're they're not R-related things. They're things to do with how you set up your computer. But it seems that most of you got to that. Yeah. There's a couple of we'll still wait a bit. I think I'll move along for now. So that was just how to illustrate how this works. So, if you have more complex cases, so this was a very simple case, just pick everything between x, y, between x and y. But you have some helper functions. You can tell, and most of the time you won't need them, but if you want to be a proper data scientist, you can use this type of things, which just starts with, and it will select, for example, all the variables starting with an X, so or ABC in this case. So that will help you, for example, if you have downloaded a data frame and you want all the so you've renamed all your variables and you want to keep all the X variables but not all the Y variables. You can use this command rather than having to use multiple lines of code. Ends with, it's the same as starts with. Contains, if it has something like male, you can select all the male type of variables from your data frame. And then something really tricky, which you shouldn't worry about it, but it can also use code to look for repeating characters. And if you want to find out more, this is regular expressions and regex. And so you can, this type of command matches dot one, selects all variables that match a regular expression. This one matches any variables that contain repeated characters. So there are more complex ways in which you can select cases from your data frame. You likely won't need any of those, but I'm giving you them for your reference in case for your project you have to do things like select all the X variables or all the Y variables to speed it up. If you want to find out more about regular expressions, you can read more there. You can also have a numerical range and then say x1 through 3. That will match everything which is called x1, x2, and x3. And these commands can be, again, quite useful rather than you having to write lots of lines of code to make a new data frame. Okay, so you can also rename variables. So select can be used to rename variables, but it drops all the variables that are not explicitly named. Instead, you can use rename. I find this quite buggy in DeepFire, so I tend not to use DeepFire. So, but you can feel free to use rename to change variable names. I run into lots of errors with that because it doesn't like other packages which are also using rename and all sorts of things. So if you have to rename things, then the easiest way to do this is to do this. So names, flights, reds. This tells you the position of the 3 columns. So this is the reduced data frame like the one you just made, and this will make it year, month, day, and you have to use C because it's a vector, as you remember from last time with labels. And then you can use the head command to look at it, and so it's labeled it correctly. So this is year, month, day. So as in your example, if you would rename it, you would use 1 to 6 because you have 6 variables, and you would use that type of expression to rename all the 6 column names in your data frame. Everybody understands this? So it's just, should you want to rename things? And usually it's easier to rename things in your data frame if you then make a pretty picture rather than having to change the picture. So it's easier if you have like really handy, nice data names rather than year red or like all sorts of other things. If you call it recoded.year or something, that's nicer. Okay, so that's how you rename variables, which you might want to do. Now mutate, which I also told you about, and before I talk to you about mutate, I have to talk about this ugly beast, which is the pipe, which is this, and it basically means apply a function to something. Yeah, so it's a percentage point greater than percentage point. Yeah, and it just means take this and do this to this. Yeah, that's all you have to know. And again, mutate allows you to make new variables. It's like your SPSS transform. And to give you an example, so here we want to add new things to our flights database. We have to give it something where it has to apply to. This is the pipe, the ugly beast. And we tell do mutate, and this will make a speed variable, which is distance divided by airtime times 16, because airtime is in minutes in this case. Yeah. And I also made a new, you can add several behind them, so I just put comma, and I want the logarithm of speed, and I just use log speed. So all the commands you've seen last time about transforming things, taking logarithms, exponentials, square rooting things, all those type of things are available via mutate. Yeah, so it's a very handy thing to have. Yeah, and so if you wanted a new data frame, then you would call this something else. You would call this flights new or something, and then it will have only added those variables. But sometimes you want to add things to your current data set, and that's what this example is showing you. Everybody with me? If I'm going too fast, now's the time to do. to do this. Another way to do this, rather than making a new thing, is transmute. That will not. That will just make sure that it's only the things you've put in here that will be in the data frame. So it won't keep all the other old ones. So that's shorthand, which you might want to use also, rather than making a new thing and then dropping all the other variables. Okay. So there's a whole load of helper functions which help you to use mutate. But the key thing you should remember is that all the things you saw last time, like you can use R as a calculator, are things you can apply to mutate. So are things you can feed into mutate. So you can use it to calculate distances. You can use it to calculate logarithms, all sorts of other things. And you can read more about the helper functions later. What you'll often have to do for statistics is centering variables and standardizing variables. So some of that should hopefully ring a bell. Yeah. So centering is where we subtract the mean, and it's often used to make scores more interpretable. So in regression, sometimes in interactions, I'm not sure if you have 2x2 designs with ANOVA, what will happen is that you would take a centered variable to make it more interpretable, and also to avoid multicollinearity, which you might have heard of. So what happens just with centering is you subtract the mean from it to get the new variable, and that's a big deal. This multicollinearity we'll talk about when we talk about regression, and we'll talk about it when we talk about ANOVA interactions. And the other thing you might want to do is standardizing, which is z-scoring. So you might recall from year 1, so that there are things which are z-scores, and z-scores are basically standardizing everything so that the mean is 0 and the standard deviation is 1. Yeah. And this is how you would do that by the mutate command. So I've made here like speed sent, like as you remember the speed variable which I made in the last slide, which is now stored. And I say speed minus mean speed, and you have to remove the missings, because if there's one missing in there, it won't run. So either you would have removed all missings beforehand, or in this case, because I haven't done that, I use na.rm is true to say remove all the missings when you calculate the mean. Because if there's one missing, it will say I can't compute the mean because there's a missing variable. Yeah. And calculating a standardized z-score is even easier. It's just using the scale command. So scale will turn it into a z-score. It's really straightforward. So just as I said, the na.rm is true removes any missings, and you might have come across that when you've done in your assignment and tried to calculate means. And this is a reminder about z-score. So 3 standard deviations away is quite extreme. Yeah, so it's usually the outliers which you remove from your data set. And so if you have everything between here, it's like 68% of the data, 1 standard deviation above and 1 standard deviation below. So like you remember from last time, the standard deviation gives you some information about the range or in a variable. And this is just a graph to remind you. But you should have all heard about z-scores. Anybody who hasn't heard about z-scores, or like, you've all heard about z-scores? Great. Now, the next function is summarize. And summarize is get one row with data from the data frame. And so summarize flights mean speed speed na.rm through will just give you as a result this, which is mean speed with the calculation. So often you want to use that to then export results, for example, just a data frame with its mean, median, mode. So you could write something which would summarize, which would then give you a data frame with all the mean, median, mode type of things stored separately. Yeah, that's why you would want to use summarize. Any questions? So group by is another command, and in this case we might want to compare airline carriers. So we might want to compare United Airlines versus Delta Airlines, and we can use group by. So we can make a new data frame which is by carrier, group by flights carrier. So it tells R that tells R. Yeah, it does tell R. So it tells R that the data set is now structured in a way that we're interested in comparing groups. Now, if we then do summarize by carrier, it will print it by the 16 different airlines. So we will have done. So here I made a new variable which is delay, which is the mean departure delay, and then we'll have done it for 9E, AA, So all these different airlines. I don't know what 9E is, but AA is American Airlines, and so we'll have done that for all things separately. So it's a very easy way of getting your data grouped in a certain way. So group by is usually most useful if you combine it with summary. If you want to get some summary statistics for all different things, but you can in principle use it for any type of command. Everybody with me? So try it yourself. So again, calculate gain, which is arrival delay minus departure delay. And so I think for some of that, you might have to go back to the original Brother database rather than the other one. Calculate airtime hours, which is airtime in minutes divided by the number of minutes an hour, which is 16, in case you're wondering. And now calculate gain per hour, which is gain divided by airtime hours. And standardize gain per hour, and use group by to calculate the means of gain per hour by carrier. So that should be something you should be able to do with all the slides I've just given you. Yeah? So have a go. So all steps are there. So you need mutate, you need summarize, you need group by in order to do those type of things. So first calculate gain.
So do I need to get a different data set?
Then, load it. Yes. Sorry about the laptop. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you will I'm not sure if you install the DeepFire. So the safest bet is if you load it under some type require DeepFire. They can follow just the steps. To work on the overall flight schedule, so we'll take one more to calculate somewhat because it has more variables with one you don't have to use it. So you might have to flick back and forth between between some of the slides to find the commands. And remember that R is picky about using capitals and non-capitals and all sorts of things. Yes, so but that will make a data frame, which is called gain. So you have to calculate it by mutate within the thing. So we don't want to make a new data frame.
So you just mutate it
Yeah.
instead. Right, okay. Thank you.
So we need it to be part of within the mutate command. And what you've written would give you a new data frame, which is called gain, which only has one variable, which is arrive minus which you could do, but it's not what you would want. You want it to be, then you could still add it to your data frame.
Yeah.
But it's a long way around compared to using a mutate command.
So we're using the pipe.
Yes, I would recommend you use the pipe. There are ways to do it without the pipe.
So that it would be. Have I done this right?
Well, no, because this will make it. This will make a data frame, which says gain. So mutate has to know that it's going to make it to support gain. So if you go back to the slides, you have to name the variable within. You have to say gain is.
So name it is in like.
So you have to within this brackets. You have to say gain is.
It is.
No.
Like how do I say Alright, okay.
And then you have to see if you want to, ideally you would want to call out the same so now it will still make a new
I thought that's what I wanted.
yeah, so
Is that not what I want?
sometimes you just want to work with the same database and just add things to it.
Right, so I don't want to make a new
So then
database.
you would call it flights again,
So just like this, yeah?
as in the example above.
So I just want it like that rather than
No,
this.
you still have to feed it flights.
Right,
And the thing before that, so you would like it, if you want it to be part of the database, flight should be here. It should be,
so it should be the other way around.
because you find gain here. So this bit will take flights and mutate, and it will add a gain variable to it.
Yeah, I thought that's what I wanted.
You want it to do it, but what will happen now is that you're making a new database called gain,
Right, okay.
and that's not what we want. We want it to be flights.
So just get rid of it.
You call it flights, and then we will
Right there.
yes, and then done. And then if you go and look at our flights database, you first see now it has 20 variables,
And gain is made, so it's made
and
in the
gain is at
variable.
the end.
Right, okay, thank you, I get it now.
And so the next step is calculating airtime hours. And you can do that in a single line because the things are available, or you could use a new line of code to calculate airtime hours.
Right, so that you mean what you want to do is make a new variable in the flight one. So
How are you doing?
where we had the flight before, now it's gone
So you can already
20 rather than
start with typing. It's great. So
So you should
yeah,
have one more. So you add flights
no.
gain to it by rotating.
Matter outside of the so everything between the three ticks is our code, and everything outside it is
I'm going to have to bring it closer, please.
So it doesn't matter.
So you've got,
No, it has to
I
be
think we've
between
got the same
these
code
three
there.
ticks. These three ticks.
I think that's oh, between
Yeah.
set there.
Yeah. And the best if you make sure that it's always because there's things between this are things which R will evaluate.
I've just
We'll
made
look
new
at any
variables
code
now.
which is there. Yeah. So now you want to use the same type of command that you have there. Yeah. And then you want to again type flights. And then you want to use the type which I've just shown you, which is the percentage points. And then if you get the slides up, if not, I'll see if I can. Did everybody manage to make at least the first? Okay, I'll come round. Just in case you need a reminder of what the pipe looks like, this is what the pipe looks like. Okay.
So do I have to make a new page?
What has happened yes, it has. So now the flights. Very shocking.
Flights again. So have you not made a new, have you run the chart?
Yeah, so I've run it all.
Yeah, so what you've done is you've made a new variable and you've made a data frame for like this. So the variable is in there, but you've also made a new an entire database. Like based on it's based on well, no, it won't be. This one saying
Yeah.
so this will add it to the original database. This will make a new database called flights. Similar variables which will
Well, the thing is, you've done exactly the same as me. So I don't really like
Oh, is that what we're doing first? So that would be. It wouldn't, sorry, it would be
If you don't name it, we'll just answer. If you don't name it, we'll just use.
And what, and then put it over to these like games, we don't even know what
Database, which is game.
airtime
So what we want is
equals
game.
arrival delay.
Database was on the variables, library, in there. No, that work. Airtime is either out in games. Sorry, that wasn't clear. So, error mutate. Yeah, perhaps you can back that way. I don't know how you. So it's maybe gain variable all the way.
Sorry, I'm on the totally wrong one.
You
No, mine worked.
Now you have to do the same process to add airtime. So again, you use flights mutate.
I put
And then,
airtime
yeah. Later in a second, I'll just find slice for it.
Right, it's not bringing anything up though.
Okay.
I don't think it's not. I've done the same assembly. This is where it's fine.
Yeah, it's because DeepFire is multi-tile time, so it's fun functions about it. And so if you do require, so if you have a line require DeepFire, hopefully you'll run. So if you restart R or if you
Yeah, it's not that because you just stop it.
there you go. And then if you try it again now,
That's like,
No, I mean,
but it will have done the chunk.
Oh.
Find out what's going on.
Okay, we can put this. So now actually game per hour, so that's game 5 times.
Also, we have use the search chunk. So it says here, there's an unexpected string, and that's just it. Yeah, if you put a hashtag in front of it, you won't read it, but otherwise it will think it's our code, and it will say, I don't know what to do. Neat, you're also missing. So you have 3 front ticks, but no 3 back ticks. So within the things, so that's all. Another difference between your code and your code is you need the 3 back ticks at the bottom. Then it will run the chunk. You manage to.
for the bit that's geared per hour,
Yeah.
do I have to rename the 2 bits I've changed first?
No, because it will now have that data frame. So it's just the same. Well, yeah, they're not in there.
What is it?
So,
I've had them in there.
no, because before it's at 19 now, it should be 21. Well, what you've done is you've made a variable, but you've not named it.
Is airtime just one word now?
That's
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I don't know.
So you've given it to command, like you type it, but you haven't written down.
It's done something, but I don't know what.
So that's what I'm
No, it's called airtime on it. Yeah,
I've read.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Standing. Hello, yes. Did you get it?
Otherwise, we'll just take this
I didn't. I thought you
and use that as a variable.
so that's all you have to do here.
Yes. So if you do this,
I think we've got those in
yeah.
Yeah, so so we got
So now, now named it scroll.
so the first one where you take
Yeah. As in the example.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what I'm doing in the
So you have to do
Oh, that. So the
Is it?
which is airtime. So that's minutes divided by the number of airtime is gain.
I think we've done it right by this.
Right, let's have a look. What do you need to do? What do you need?
So in case you're confused, there is a variable called airtime in your data set. So
Yeah.
Airtime divided by
It's just a slash.
yeah, divided by
So that's how many. But it's airtime hours equals airtime divided by.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that right?
So airtime divided by 60.
Oh, yeah.
So that's
Yes.
yeah, and then that's
Okay, so it's standardized.
standardizing.
you get whatever.
I suppose it is all there, baby. Oh, also, I didn't realize that our time of fing.
So sometimes
This one? I didn't realize.
All right, don't worry.
I'm really sorry. Like, you have to
No,
do that and then. You're definitely right. Definitely before like doing that. But I enjoy it. I went to James
yeah, so this will remove all missing. So if there's missing, then R will be able to calculate. Not necessarily. If you write all the missing in the database, then you don't have to do that. So if you're sure that there is no missing in it, then you don't have to do the same. So sometimes it's easier to just remove all the missing beforehand.
So it's speed standard.
Yes.
I don't know if that's.
So it's standardized. So gain stand.
Yeah, so that's the variable. So when you force because they're all
No, it won't be speed, will it? It'll do gain. Speed plus scale.
and yeah, sometimes you can ask for summaries also. Just to get a print all the variables. It's the easiest thing to just yeah. So
I would
what
not
happened before is that you try to feed it airtime hours, and that's the variable we're defining. We're telling it. Airtime hours is airtime hours divided by 60. It doesn't know what airtime hours is because it doesn't exist.
Right, so that's why I'm saying. Right, well, that you use the standardized one.
Yeah, so you can just check flights.
Yeah, I think you're
Use that wrong. Yeah, means standard. That's good.
So,
Oh my god.
Considering like half an hour about scrapping and how
Then you can use group I to calculate the means.
Right.
And if you're done, you can have a quick bathroom break, and then we'll continue.
Get rid of the flights. Get rid of all lights. Yeah, get rid of that.
What?
Delete.
On, not even like tips, sorry. You know when you've done flights, like percentage or whatever. That's cool. Yeah. So sorry, I'm going to
like the ones that
Well, no,
and then select.
So, there's a couple of trickier things in there. All of them should be addressable from
So do we just have as many, like we can start it now?
Yes, that's
We
what I
can
said
start
last
the
time.
assignment now and
You
then.
can start work, like, actually, as we go along, you can add a chunk. But the end
So
solution,
so we can like do it together.
ARR.
no, so I'll be able to find out if you did it. Because I asked you,
And then you do the same thing
and I asked her, and like, if you ask all of the same arguments, that's very lucky.
Sure, we can do it together, but
Yeah.
change it
Well, you'd be surprised how easy it is to find out how you cheat. Because you'll make the same errors. So if you make
just message each
and like also you have to take screenshots, which is in your home folder, and you have to generate those files.
And then
So
next line,
you can still try and cheat, but it's going to be
doing
difficult.
the
It's
first
going to find
part
out.
of the calculating again. Then you do flights. And then flights
Yeah,
again.
it's cheating. Like it's like if you
And then the pipes
like
like
it's fine working
even
like
sends straight
but you say it's something you say this is my own work. So if I take a word from my
Like how you
students
do that
gain
and I don't list them and I say this is my work. Why should you don't cheat? Because I will find out and then waste the check.
Have you got the code by then?
No, I'm doing it now.
No, Sam, I'm going along on this
Specific.
and see if I can
And
find it.
then I can tell that in fact.
I don't know if we have to do like the flights and all of that for it.
Okay.
But
So what are we asking this for then? I don't why we typing?
So you're getting it to finding out the
I think it's NY flights rather than NYC flights. So you can see here, NYC flights, NY flights. That's the, no.
You know what I'm writing this. I think I'm going to say
Now if you go, voila.
print that screen.
So it's really picky about things like that. So NY flights is something different than NYC flights. So that's why that has to be correct. So yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like on this side, like as we're typing things like this, it's like popping up at this point, it's like lose one.
No.
By carrier.
You have as many attempts as you want to submit, and the final one you want to pick. Well, you can try and work
How do you
for
do? How do you tab
so
it?
it's not sort of submission.
Or do you press?
I just
Upload yes.
Oh, there's a way to do it.
And then upload PDF. Or so you make HTML file for it, upload the screenshot. So you can get on behind your PC and click as many times as you want to get it right.
Oh, use this.
There's no need to worry about it.
No, I can say just use this.
Your power.
I know, that's what happened to me there. I'm going to say sorry, I'm just writing it down.
If you go back to the slides,
That's the original.
So with game per hour one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like should game equals scale.
So we're using the group
yeah, so you make your data cancel by carrier, ideally.
this C, is that what it's got? Is that what
No,
you do?
C will make a vector. So you need to
You
use
just
group
say-
group underscore by commands. Yeah.
We don't want to use the carrier.
And then you have to give it
Right,
something.
so we're doing
Oh,
by
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm just writing this down.
And then you have to tell by format. Just count. You're getting there. So it's skill. So now you have to first name it something else because this is the same as that one. So you want to call it game power set or skill of some sort. Otherwise, it will just.
How do you do the mean?
Right, it's right. So
I'm still trying.
you can, but I
So
think
if I
it's
carry
easier to have some different things. So then you skill, then you type in between. You would have game per hour that will skill. So this is telling mutate. It's making new variable game per hour skill, which is skill and game per hour.
Yeah, so like that.
Group by flights carrier and then do some more.
Yeah.
You know,
So the first one you assign.
Yeah, and then
should be less than 0. So most of you are coming to the end, so hopefully.
Is that not equal?
Not yet.
And if not, varying abilities. If, so if you need a quick break, now's the time, and then I'll just continue.
So that's an open bracket there. Yeah.
So that's so then after I've got the mean of game per hour according to the carrier.
Yeah, and you should still leave it in our because it might not work because you have to remove the missings.
So then M
Yeah, and right now, well, yeah. I think you need to go back at the end.
The second one is
Five,
So on here, do you want to when someone can open up unless it's students to watch?
so this is text. These brackets are brackets as mark. So everything you write in the text, R will read as code. Everything outside the text is markdown, which you wrote last time. It will print the nice pretty bits with like balls and things. Everything between text and R codes and are things where R will do something. And these are things which R will ignore. But if you make a mistake and you write text here, then R will say, you can't ignore the warning. What do you mean? Like, this is not the value.
Like the summarize. Mine's just deleted.
Yeah, so this is
Because I'll put like summarize by carrying. Oh,
Should we meet in the middle?
this is what I'm like. Got to
Yeah. Alright, so after me, you're doing game prior again, and then you kind of like get rid of the non-variable things.
Oh, so you just put mine. See, I was going to put that, but I didn't have that.
Yeah, so game prior, comma,
And then,
yeah,
absolutely not true. Has it still got the text? Yeah. So, oh, does. So it's very idiot. Does it say something? Summarize?
So it's just copy the line of code you have before.
So, like, you know how to read it? Then what? Yeah, rename that one. Just standardize.
But now we lights. So we get rid of airtime hours and from that. Now we have exactly the same command as before.
Mine's not working.
So now we do airtime hours. Yeah, I'm sure we'll call it airtime hours.
It's right, but it's just not running.
Hours are like with underscore. Like I use the underscore because I like underscore in terms of annotations.
Yeah, because then you have to put mean. For some reason it's not running.
Well, if you click run, it will print the chunks below it. So
It's not coming up with anything.
it won't be here. It will be here. It will be in this one. If you try it, okay, and so now it should be airtime. Like a lot of them are like just have airtime, like air underscore time. That's the very correct.
Oh, dude.
And then we don't want minus, but we want to divide by 6. Yeah. Yeah. So if you now do this.
Going over that chapter last night. So wait,
Sorry, magic happens. So we went from 20
that
to
is
create a new variable called airtime.
do I have to
Yeah, so mutate, as I tried to explain, adds things to the data. And what we were trying to do before was making a new data frame. So yeah, see that? Or you can use view, like that, and what is shown in instruction 1, type view, and actually lights. Do this. You can also type view. Okay, so that's the 2 steps.
This is
And now,
but I don't understand why it's not running, so.
Is it, does it not stop?
No, that's actually been up there.
this is the yeah. This is the hard part. This. You can see but it won't change the lights because that's 330,000 data. So see, so you can also see these bits. These bits are so I'll have to move on. But the more you work with it, the easier it will become. All the information that is starts and that will be that. Try to play game per hour. So is it?
It still won't run.
Okay.
And I've tried HTML and it.
Type to the next space.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think actually what you want to do is you want to call it something, and then you want to call it summary.
Do you know what, right? So when you do
Like after you do the byte carrier, so you now want to make a data frame with call something like
okay, do you mean like literally all the 8 to like 5?
I wasn't last night, I was looking at them.
Yeah.
I don't get why you
Yeah, 8 to like 5.
yeah, and then summarize command on the byte after.
Right, what does that have?
So it's all just move all the
Oh,
and then you
so it's
can
like what I've done wrong.
yeah.
Oh,
So it doesn't know where to do that, where to put it.
where to put it, right, okay, that makes
So if you do this, you now click run. You now do run. Yeah, roll it down. You try looking in there. There should be a summary.
Imagine she said that as well.
Should be a summary.
I sent it. Doing what?
Well, it's not the same for all. Yeah, and then you try to fix that problem.
What you're calculating, so after it seems to do get around equals getting divided by the yeah,
So each side
yeah.
has so you have to call the reason you want it is because in this chunk you have utility so you write this library for requires
So, reply
yeah, and then non-brackets, then DeepFire.
okay, so working fine now.
Yeah, because you had it loaded here. If you
Oh,
try to
did I?
if you try to
Right.
if you try to so it will forget. So if you don't load it in between, and now if you click this, it has the carriers and the game around.
So if I yeah, why is it so I'm trying to click the summary. So why would
Because yeah,
what does that mean?
it's meant to happen because the summary is
Right,
so what you would do is like in the example where I use add summary, so then it would print the first 6 lines of data.
right.
But it won't print like very large strings because then the HTML will just overrun. So if you want to print parts of it, you use add summary. And so you can't see it down there.
Isn't he a person
So you can't see it in your right hand panel. So if you want to be part, if you want the data frame to be part of your things in okay. I think this is a sign I should move along. Okay. We definitely have some people who managed to do it here. You managed to do the group by in the back. Great. You managed to do the group by. Yeah. So I'm going to move along. And you should, for those who didn't get it, try and work your way through it, or try to talk to the people who did so after class. Okay. So often what you want to do is replace missings. So you want to replace missings in your data frame with the mean or the median. Yeah, and that also becomes a lot easier when you use DeepFire. So what I've done here is flights, the type, mutate. Departure delay no missing, and then I use an if-else command to replace something with a mean. Yeah. So if-else is .na departure delay. So this is what you should remember from the first time of class. Is .na will check if something is missing or not. Yeah. And this will replace it with the mean. Departure delay na.rem is t. You can abbreviate through to t, and then departure delay. So this will keep the departure delays for the first things, and if it finds a missing, it will replace it with the mean of departure delay. And then you can print, you can check with the mean because that means that we can then leave behind this na.rm is true, because now everything should have a variable, right? Well, all cases should be complete because we replaced the missing. And that's exactly what happens. Because if you wouldn't do that, we get an error because there's a missing case in there and it can't compute because there's something missing. Yeah? So I use an if-else function, and I've shown you that you can abbreviate true to T. So far, so good. Now that we know the basics of manipulating data sets, we're going to move on to the second bit, which is making graphs. Why is plotting your data important? Have any of you heard of Anscombe's quartet? So these are 4 data sets, and all of them have this correlation, which is a high correlation, but they look completely different. So they're the same type of data sets, but one is, as you would hope, like a nice linear pattern. But this also gives you a correlation of 0.816. This also gives you a correlation of 0.816, and this also gives you a correlation of 0.816. So you might find something like, go, yes, I found a really massive correlation, but it's important to always plot your data to see what it looks like, because they point to different problems. So here you've plotted something as being linear, but it's curvilinear. Here there's an outlier problem, and here it's just dichotomous. So you have one group scoring this, and one person scoring that. So these are highly identical data sets, and they give you the same correlation coefficient. And so that's why it's always worthwhile checking visually what's happening to your data, and not just trust correlation coefficients or summary statistics. So, and often you want to test assumptions by looking at it. So does it sort of look normal? Then you can assume it sort of will be normal, and you can then do your further test statistics on this. So it's important to that you learn how to plot data and look at that data. This amazing thing is the Datasaurus, which is an expansion of Anscombe's quartet, and it basically takes any type of thing and transforms it into these type of data sets. So it starts out with the same points and transforms them, and you can read more about it there, but I think it's pretty cool. So again, you get the same type of starting data points, but you can get all sorts of different patterns going on, even though you have the same summary statistics. So if we want to make graphs, we use ggplot2, which is a graphing package. There are some other graphing packages in there, and this one does mostly charts. And it also has some helper packages, which I always recommend you load. And again, you should by now know that it's important that you tell the R chunk that it needs the bits and bobs. So you can use library or require and say, load this. So library ggplot2 scales. If you use newer versions, then you won't need to do that. Our color brewer, which gives you all the pretty colors which you want. GG themes, which allows you to apply some custom-made themes, which, for example, Google or the Wall Street Journal or other people have applied, and it will automatically make it look like something from the Wall Street Journal, which is pretty amazing. Okay, so how would you do a scatter plot? Because our data set is truly massive, I've done in the first step something simple. I've got all the flights from Christmas Day, yeah. So that's the month and day. So by now you should know that filter selects a subset, and all the flights going from JFK Airport. So rather than, because if you plot like 300,000 points, it's going to look super messy. So that's why, for the examples, I'll use a far reduced set. But in principle, you could use the overall data set. So if you do a scatter plot with ggplots, you use the ggplot command. It has to have the data frame, which I've just made, and then AIS is the aesthetics. So, and this tells it what should be on the x-axis and what should be on the y-axis. And so here I've plotted departure delay and arrival delay. And I then tell it what type of graph I want via this tm.point type of command. Then you should get something like this, which looks like a scatter plot, which you've come across from SPSS also. So it's all every single point is a flight. Yeah, so and then that allows us to compare departure time versus arrival delay, departure delay versus arrival delay. Any questions thus far? So ggplots is again a package which takes a data frame and does some things to it and then makes a pretty nice graph out of it. So if you were clever, you saw that there was a warning. There are two rows removed, yeah, and that's because there were 2 missing cases. And again, you can replace those. And here I've replaced them. And previously I've done it for the whole set, but I haven't done it for the small set. So here I just will do it again. So this flight, JFK new. This is the pipe, which you remember. This is mutate, departure delay no miss. This is the if else command which you saw before, and this does it that way. And I've done it for departure delay and for arrival delay. So this is just to get rid of the missings, and then that should get rid of that warning saying you've tried to plot missings. Yeah. And so if we do that again, now you can see that it wouldn't have printed a warning, and we get the same type of graph we had before. So we have ggplot commands, the data set it's trying to look at. AS is the aesthetics, and it needs to know for certain graphs what is going to be on the x-axis and what's going to be on the y-axis, which I specified here. So x is departure delay no miss. You can see that's printed on the bottom. Y is arrival delay no miss, and you can see that's printed on the y-axis. Yeah? So far so good? We can color them by airline, which you might want to do, and that's fairly easy. So what we so that's the bit we had before. So ggplot, your data, AIS, the x variable, the y variable, plus the point to make a scatter plot. Now let's color it by carrier, and it's very simple. Just within this AIS bracket, we add a comma and color as carrier, and that will color it by carrier. And so what we then do is graph color plus points, and so we can just store an object, tell it. So this is the base. As you want, this is the base things which we tell the graph, and then we can add plus points, and that will make a scatter plot out of it. And then look at the beautiful colors, which is it's picked. So there should be 16, or perhaps some things didn't fly on Christmas Day, but these are all the airline colors, and then perhaps for some things. So this is how you color points based on a group. Yeah. Everybody with me? Now the nice thing is it has very much flexibility, and it only takes one line of code to change from one graph to a completely different graph. So that's the beauty of it. So we can make, using a different geom, we can get a very different graph, and this will make the bubbles the size of the sample just by using geom count rather than geom point. So it is important if you want a scatter plot. You would use geom underscore points. If you would use geom count, it would give you something where there are bubbles as to how many cases there are. Pretty neat, no? So let's try another one. So you might recall regression lines and smoothers and lowest graphs, perhaps even like locally weighted regression lines. So what I've had here is just I asked it to draw a line through it, and so graph delays plus geom count plus geom smooth will give you something like this. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't reskill it, and so it will print something that says what type of method it's using, which you can ignore, and you can change that. That's for your reference. So LOAS here stands for locally weighted regression. So it's tried to fit a regression line to it, and you can see lots of points here, and so that's why it's trying to estimate as close as possible a locally weighted regression. And so it's trying to get a fit line which gets as many points as possible through the data. And so then you get this type of line going, and these bands are confidence intervals. So it's the amount of uncertainty within the range of that line. So the nice thing is that with just one line of code, we can get very different graphs going, and we can without having to press lots of buttons and all sorts of things. So try it yourself. I hope it won't take you too much time, but we'll see how far it goes. So make a similar data set as I did, but now take LaGuardia Airport for Xmas Day. Make a plot with departure delay on the x-axis and speed on the y-axis, and color points by carrier. So you first have to install ggplot.
Yeah, so I've got ggplot.
Yeah, so make sure that so one will then be in your user library, and the other one will be in, so make sure that both of them, but if you use require within the code, you can also use this best to use right next to then we'll make sure that it's and yeah. And so you have the examples from the slides on how to select from Christmas Day.
you already got your LGA?
So if you're super smart, you would just copy my code from the HTML and just replace
Where?
replace JFK with LGA. Because I printed that code in
Wait, can you show me something that's really simple, right? But you know when you tab, so you've got half there and half there. How do
Yes.
you do that?
So I know how to do it from Mac, but I don't know how to do it from Windows. But if you install it's if you I don't know how to do it from Windows. But if you have a thing which is full size, you can keep pressing it. So if you go to full screen. Yeah. So I know how to do it with Windows, but I think you can also just switch between things. You can use command arrow or control arrow to switch between windows.
Is that what we're doing?
How's it going?
I've downloaded this.
That's good.
Here. This one. This one. This bottom one. I think I was
So first, I made the LGA flags again.
Yeah.
So
Filter, right one, 12, interface origin,
LGA.
So, so what you need is
So the next, so that one creates a variable, and then you next one to create an actual graph.
why it's LGA.
Type it in.
Type in it. Yeah. And then
Flight, well,
as you would assign
flight
before, so you use this arrow.
or whatever it was.
put it in the line straight under the
Then comma.
It just has like
Yeah.
yeah.
So you use that filter.
Assigning things to the graph. So you assign what is
So I want x-axis to be
yeah, so x equals
Yes. But now we want to get rid of
just be there.
all this stuff. We want to replace mutate with
And then apply speed.
and then we get rid of all the other bits. So it's just
Just get rid of all
Yeah,
this.
no.
Yeah,
Yeah, you get rid of that. And if you look at the I'll switch back to the slice, you can sort of see what the
That's why I'm never you don't know what.
so filter, flights, mont, and then the origin should not be JFK but should be LGA for LaGuardia.
Right. Flights, go JFK, right.
Yeah, you wouldn't call it JFK new because you're making LaGuardia. So
Right.
yeah, so I wouldn't call it JFK.
where would it show me?
Yeah.
you need to install the packages.
So upstart.
Right.
Well, you can plug them in bracket. What's happened here is that
Just establish right, okay, so upright.
yeah. So first I just put the other pieces. Yeah. So what's happened is that
Alright, so type this, I'll spell Yeah.
So you would just write filter
So what needs to happen is that you have to call the package you're using within the package, otherwise it won't work. So what happened, like what the error was it's looking for a select class, but but you can't fire it up. And if you restart here, for example, it will never run. Whole this will be available to our team. Does that make sense? So if you want things to be available for R to work with, they have to be available in the chunks.
Do I have to do an enter?
So fire easy fire to there. It will remember over certain chunks if you don't make
I've run the chunks.
It will try to evaluate this piece.
And do we need that? Do we need that right?
Yeah. So I think so the issue why it wasn't running is because it needs all the information in these brackets to evaluate statements. So if you tell it to use a select function, there is no DeepFire package. Yes. Yes.
I'm just making this work.
First here, and then there.
No, we're still on the first one.
Yeah.
We're on the scatter
It's always best.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah, that's what we can't find. I can't find tweets and then the whole thing is between white now.
You know what you do with it.
So if you want to use GG pop, you type RGG.
Right, where's speed?
So speed is the variable you make.
Oh, I have to make it.
Yeah, so speed.
You make it
So will I go up a bit? Yeah.
So that's the fact that I'm straight.
Find the wrong bit.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It's a little triangle.
So this is distance on the
You were trying to get to the
If you can't make your own speed variable, you can use something else, but it could be the distance divided by the airtime hours is a measure of speed. So, in case you didn't figure out how to make a speed variable,
But we want it within the flights.
within the flights database, and then you would make that too, or you can make it in your new database. Again, with the mutate command, you can make new variables. Yeah. So what's happening here is that you, as I just tried to explain, that you have I'm typing the line myself. Available to our student. The issue is also that you might have two versions of ggplot, and one of them will be central, and the other one will be locally. So that's going to be another reason why it's not. So if you want to make sure it runs, you will always how much of this is
Oh, I've done it.
So I don't expect you to class A.
Emily.
There's a lot going on, I know, but there's time still left like snapshot knowledge.
So we have to main the speed variable and its distance divided by airtime hours.
That makes more sense.
You managed to do it? Okay. So some people manage to make their graphs. Others are.
It says remove two rows. So
Yeah.
do we remove that now?
So yeah, don't worry about the remove to row things, but if you do replace missings, you'll have the same type of warning as I have. So then you use if else command to replace the missings.
So how do I get this?
as in the command which I've shown you to use the if-else command to replace Yes, look at there. Yeah. So why does it move to rows? Because there's two misses in the data. And so what you would then normally do is, like I've shown you by this chunk, you would use the if-else command to replace that.
If-else, what's that mean?
Yeah, so if you go back to the slides, I've shown you how to use mutate to replace the missings of a variable with the means of a variable. And so that will take care of it. But this is great. So you already got this. So the reason for instance one is because there's two missings in the database, and so you have roughly the same graph as I had before.
Have you worked out speed?
This is similar to what we want, and you can calculate speeds and the speed versus just margin time.
You can put it all in one chunk.
You can put it all in one chunk, or you can make separate chunks, but then you have to make sure that you recall packages which it's using. So ideally, you would also put in here require ggplot2, because now you've loaded it manually. Oh no, it's in here, sorry. Yeah. So within each chunk, you have to sort of tell R what is available to it. Otherwise, it won't know what to look at. If you don't do that, it'll say, what is ggplot? I don't know what ggplot is. What are you talking about? Okay?
Well, I figure out where same as ours.
So I've done like on speed and then moved on to triangle size. Yes, it's got
So you're transferring
So I've done that.
So I think so if you try something intermediate before.
We downloaded
Coming from. So why? She's got something very similar to that. Why not? So because you managed to get it. So. Let's compare. So yeah, you have months other than day. It's as simple as that, probably.
Really?
Thank you.
Try and write it down.
Well,
Yes. So again, many of the errors you might make might be calling something like day, days, or month, months. So it is really picky about you using month or months. Yeah. Yeah.
God, mine's in clocks.
Okay, I'll move along. I'll still do a couple more, and then the rest I'll make as a screencast, and you should spend some time as a group, perhaps also in work teams, trying to work through some of the examples and some of the exercises. But looks like we're making good progress. I saw some beautiful charts made by people, so let's move along. Okay. The nice thing is you can tweak everything in your graph. And I'll give you an example with Delta and United Airlines. And there's a whole chunk of code here. So what I did here is I made flights JFK new with just 2 airlines, which will select Delta Airlines. And you might remember this command, which is the OR command, or United Airlines. So that will make a new data frame with just Delta Airlines and United Airlines. And that's because I want to compare those, because I like Delta or like United. So what we then do is we make a graph called Beauty, which uses ggplots, applies new to this new data frame which I made, the aesthetics, the X, Y, and the color by carrier. And then all these follow-up commands are things which will do things to make it more beautiful. And I'm not going to run through in detail, but you can, by playing around with it, you can sort of see what they do. So GM points, size, shape, alpha. So they changes the size and the shape of the points as well as how transparent they are. We can pick, we can add a nice linear regression line through it. We can tell it to use a nicer color set. So scale color brewer palette is set 1. We'll pick set 1 as a color set, and that's using the R color brewer package. So if you don't have that loaded, it won't run. We can put some nicer titles. So labs is labels, and put X is delay departure, Y is delay arrival, and I put as a title United versus Delta Showdown. So that will print as a title. So it changes the labels on the axis in the title. And then I can also add a theme to it to make it black and white or some type of pretty things. So what do you get? Something like that. It's not a proper beauty, but you can sort of see what it's done. It's like we here have the carriers in different colors, in red and blue now. We've made transparent things with different shapes. We've changed so that it now says delay departure and delay arrival. And we've changed so it has a title United versus Delta Showdown. So you can really change any type of aspect of your graph via these type of commands. And I've given you some samples. And as you work your way through examples, you'll learn how to tweak everything yourself. Yeah? Okay. There are many different types of graphs. And again, there's a lot of information coming at you, and most of it is just for your reference. So you can work through it as you go along. So we can make density plots, we can make histograms, we can make violin plots, we can make box plots, we can make bar charts, we can make bubble plots, we can make all sorts of scatter plots, all different types of plots. There's more. We can make smoothed functions, we can make lines, we can make error bars by those types of commands. Yeah. And I will not impossibly cover everything today, and most of it is just for you to find out. And so all the codes can be found online, and you can tweak them and play around with it to make beautiful graphs. So let's make a paneled histogram now for comparing two major airlines, JetBlue and Delta, on Christmas Day. So to help ourselves, we'll first make separate data sets. So sometimes it's easier to work with separate data sets and then combine them. So I made here a separate data set for Delta and a separate data set for JetBlue. By now you should know what the filter command is. So it's the one selecting Delta Airlines and JetBlue. And then here I've also chosen to written them away via the write command, which you should also remember from your first week. And I've stored them as a .csv file. So write.csv will store these newly made data sets elsewhere. So making a histogram is fairly easy. So we use plot DL, which I've chosen to call my plot, ggplot JFK delta AS the delay, because we only have one axis, we only have the x-axis, and the other things are the counts for the frequencies. And so what we then do here is the same for JetBlue. Yeah, so it's just the same, except for that here this is talking to the JFK delta dataset, and this is talking to the JFK JetBlue dataset. And then plot underscore DL, so that plot that we just made, plot geom histogram. Color is black because I want it to be black and the fill is white. So this will make a black bar with a white filling. Yeah, and this is sort of what it will look like then. So this is a histogram, which you should recall. There's some shocking delays for more than 200 minutes, which you can also see with Delta. Yeah. So bin width. So you saw that it gives you some missings, like use bin width, which is more optimal. And so this is important. You don't want it to be too large or too small. And so it's basically you're chunking your data into these different bars, which you then want to look at. So we can make a very small bin width, which is 1. Just make one case in things, and it will look something like that. Or we can make a very large bin width, which has 40 in each bin, and then it looks something like this. So you can cheat with your data if you want in how to plot it by modifying these bin widths, because some of it will look a lot better for them than the other one. Yeah, everybody understands, because it's all chunked into one. It will seem like they don't have that much delay, but if we use larger bins, they actually have a lot more delays. Yeah. So that's bin width. So you don't want it to be too large and you don't want it to be too small. And sort of the art of making graphs, you want it to be able to represent the data accurately. So Citylon 5. So here I just chose 5, and I did the same for JetBlue. So what I did here is like just added this bin width command to make it a bin of 5. Again, I'm not saying this is optimal, but I think this sort of looks okay. And again, you see this type of pattern, and again, you see this type of outcome. And this is the same for Jet. So the first one is plot DL, and the other one is plot JetBlue. So one is Delta Airlines, the other one is JetBlue Airlines. And you can see also, because it's trunked here, that it's better to fly. If you don't want to avoid like really horrible delays, it's better to fly JetBlue than it is to fly Delta Airlines, because they don't have anything above 200, it seems. 200 minutes delay. Yeah? Everybody sort of okay? We can change the labels, again, using the labs commands, and we can specify ilab is count and xlab is fing. So just putting I and x in front of it will change its appearance. So what's done here is it's changed the x label and it's changed the y label. We can do the same for JetBlue. Again, it's changed the x label and it's changed the y label. We can change the ticks and the axis limits, so we can change the range of what it's plotting. And we can do that via scale y continuous, 0.50, and we can add it, we can tell it to make pretty breaks, like the number of breaks we basically want. And so this will then make a range. So it's rescaled it, so it's going from 0 to 50 here, and it's put a set amount of ticks in between. Yeah? We can also change the x-axis, and then just scale x continuous rather than y continuous. And again, it will. I've chosen here to make a set number of breaks in the data. So you can see here. So this one still goes from 0 to 20, but this one now goes from 0 to 250, and it's put in breaks in between. Everybody with me? So this is just modifying some of the aspects of your histogram, because the defaults might not be good. They might be. You might want to compare them. In the end, we need all of the commands in one go. Or you need to because if you add a plus, it will forget. So unless you say store this in this by this arrow, like then it will forget. So it will just print it, but then it won't forget. It will forget that you've told it to change the axis or add the title. So unless you store it in an object, it will forget. Yeah. So either you have to have lots of pluses at the end and all the commands behind it, or you have to store the intermediate object. So if you print one line, so it will have forgotten if I do scale y continuous and I do something else, if I just the plus command, it will have forgotten the y continuous bit, unless I've stored it into plot DL or plot JBlue. Yeah? So you need to do intermediate storage, or you need to have all the commands in one go via lots of pluses. So you can say plus ilabs, plus xlabs, plus scale continuous, etc. Yeah? Now teams. So some of you might use Google Docs, and so we can apply some templates to make it look cleaner. And so it's very simple. Again, you use the plus and then team_gdocs. And you can look at all sorts of teams. There's one for the Washington Street Journal. There's all sorts of other teams. That's via the GG Teams package. So if you did not load that package, it won't run. So again, you need all the helper packages, which I've told you about in the beginning. And this will have printed it like this. It will make it prettier, perhaps in terms of put these vertical lines in here. It's italicized the x-axis, so it made it slightly prettier, perhaps, than the default which we have. Yeah. So teams are just about changing the appearance. The base size is basically which font you want the labels to be in. And 14 will print at 14, 16 will print at 16. Basically how large you want the bits to be for your titles and your axes. Okay? All in one go. So this is just all the previous steps, but now in all one go, and you can see that all the pluses are added in between. And then you should get something like this. Yeah, unfortunately it's trunked it off. So we have the GG team, we have this range, we have the same things, and we have this specified X and Y labs that we have. So all this code is just combined one thing, and if you don't store it in between, it will be gone. So all via pluses in one go, or store intermediate objects. Yeah? So try it yourself. That will be for you to do it at home. I've already given you the solution, so if you're super lazy, then you won't have to do it. And that's the type of graph you should be able to get. You can save it by the gg save command, and then it will store in your working directory. So whatever your working directory is, that's where the graph will appear. Most of the time you want to save it as PDF, but you can also save it as .png, .jpeg, .postscript, all sorts of other things. It will specify the width and the height, like how big you want your graph to be, and you can say, do I want it to be in millimeters, or do I want to be in pixels, or in inches? So you can change the size of your graph as you want to. So you can change output size to different units. You can choose DPI for how big the resolution is you want it to be, and you can use different formats, and it will be stored in your working directory. We can combine multiple charts, and we use CloudPlot for that. So I made a separate plotJBlue chart and a separate plot for Delta Airlines. I suppose you want to combine them and have them together. Then normally you would turn to Photoshop of some sort and you would copy and paste those type of things, but we can actually combine them via plot grids. So for that we need the CloudPlot package, and we use plot grids, and then this is the plot for Delta Airlines. This is the plot for JetBlue. If we want labels, we can say this is the A panel and this is the B panel, and then we can also say how big the label should be, and then we can say you want the graphs to be aligned horizontal or you want it to be aligned vertically. That's the H, so the H just stands for horizontal in this case. So that, if you do that, then you get the nice the charts we just made panel together into a single figure, which is useful for something for when you're making your reports also. We'll do a couple more minutes and then we'll go. Yeah, so what you can't print because the resolution is not great on the screen. I'll see if I can. Oh, that's made it worse. Okay, now you can see. So this is a command to save that chart, plot panels. We'll then store it somewhere. So what do you think of this graph? So what's the interpretation? Shoot. So perhaps rather than checking email, you can still look at the chart. What do you think?
JetBlue has a much larger amount of departure delays than Delta.
Yes, but there's presumably more flights. But there's more outliers. You can see there's more extreme cases in Delta than there is in JetBlue. So there's none of them go above 150. So most of them are squeezed in between 0 and 50. So they're sort of okay, I would say. But you can see you have some outlying flights in Delta. So I think that's what I would say is the key takeaway. Any other things you want to note or see about these graphs? So they allow side-by-side comparison, but we'd have to rescale them because now there's a lot more JetBlue flights than there are Delta flights. Yeah, so that's why it makes it not perhaps easy as interpretable. So what is good and bad about this chart? So if one of them has lots of flights and the other one doesn't have a lot of flights, it's very difficult perhaps to see what's going on. I think it's quite clear, but we only have two groups, so you could consider overlaying the charts. So you could see how big the bar is and then have the other bar behind it, and then you could see how well they did. So we have varying sample sizes, which might detract from it. We have lots of white space, which also isn't very pretty. And we have units, which we didn't mention. So we could perhaps still add on this one that this thing is in minutes. So rather than just because people just go, what's 250, like that. Okay, one more slide and then we'll. No, I'll just. So what I'll do is the remainder, which is the violin plot. I'll make a screencast of it. It won't be as long normally than the other one. There's an exercise at the end where you practice making a histogram and a violin plot, and I'd like you to try that exercise by next time. For those who complete, I'll send you the solution of that. If you're struggling, take some time out. It will become progressively harder. So, and again, it's not because I wanted to make it harder. It's just about putting in the amount of hours, and then it will work. Like just working your way through it, finding out what the errors are, I make errors as well, like things like putting in months where it should be months, and it's just working through those errors and trying to find out what they are. And this is how you learn how to do statistics. Any questions? Sort of clear what you have to do. Next week we'll pick up from where I left off. I presume that you will look at slides. If you post questions, I'll answer them on the discussion board. But I presume that you will finish watching the video and finish watching the slides because there's only so much time you can spend in class doing this. And I think I would rather have you also do part of the exercises rather than me just talking the entire time. Okay? Good luck. You have to use the desktop?
That's okay, this gentleman's here. I'm just. Are you the chap who's put the request in for a projector upgrade?
Yes.
And things there? I'm going to send a quote in to the faculty.
Oh, great.
And it'll need to go through your faculty resource team, Brendan McDermott, who is in charge of that. So I'll close your ticket down, but the quote will go on the faculty.
Great.
We'll take it from
Yeah.
there.